Frustrated Nyakallong residents Mosele Katu and Ntombizodwa Leseke stand in front of a flooded house for fear that the turn will come to their house.Felix Dlangamandla For. Dozens residents of the small town Nyakallong in Allanridge in Free State, life is unbearable. Their homes are drenched with sewage with a strong odor, causing them to get sick. Every time it rains, they stay anxious, angry, and hopeless. Daily Maverick visited area about 32 kilometers from Welkom, the second largest town in state. It belongs to Matjhabeng Local Municipality, one of the 5 Lejweleputswa district municipalities. The municipality is one of many struggling in state, according to the SAI's 2021-22 report, which raised concerns that municipalities' debt exceeded its assets by 8.4 billion rupees. More on Daily Maverick. The smell is so bad that residents have to keep their doors and windows locked all day every day. Their house is just meters from the R30 road, also known as the road of the south of Allanridge. It's the only available way for them to get into town. The road often overflows with water from a dam just below it. In 2022, the road took 15 lives in 3 months. It also made headlines after an Intercape bus carrying 83 passengers was stranded in a body of water in February 2023. Later that day, truck, a sedan and Range Rover were reportedly flooded, according to local reports. It is reported that in December 2022 the road will be repaired at a cost of R22 million. Despite the expectation that it would be finished sooner during our visit, work was still going on the road. We have to confine him to the house for fear that he will run around and step on his poop. Ntombizonke Leseke is one of many residents who are unemployed and rely on her husband to put food on the table. For many years he had a small vegetable garden with cabbage and carrots in the back of his house, which he sometimes sold to his neighbors for a living, among others. But he can't do that anymore because dirty water has filled part of garden and significantly reduced size of garden. Leseke, her husband and 2 children had no history of illness when they arrived here in 2010, but have since been diagnosed with sinus problems. The smell is unbearable and there's no way to get rid of it. It's a little better if we keep the windows and doors closed every day, she says. Sewage water everywhere. Leseke's problems mirror those of Mosele Katu, except in latter's house the sewage water runs through courtyard. One walks carefully so as not to step on the dirty water that starts at the door. In the area since 1989. According to him, in May 2021 the water suddenly began to fill up. This was exacerbated by heavy rains in September. Vocal Katu said that after attempts to get answers about source of the water, a local councilor said water came from a nearby mine. The Daily Maverick was taken to the councilman's house, but he was not at home. It is worth noting that his house was also awash with dirty water. 4 years Katu looked forward to raising her children and grandchildren in the family home, but her hopes were dashed. I never thought that one day it would be like this. We no longer rejoice in rain, which is known to be a blessing from Allah. We even pray that it will not rain. As he spoke, a little boy watched from behind a locked burglar's door. Katu said it was her grandson. We had to lock him up in the house for fear he'd run around and step on his poop. Leseke said that while she can control the movements of her 2 children, it is sometimes beyond her control. I think it is a blessing of Allah that no child has from this water until now, he said. Every time it rains, some residents pray while others sit anxiously, feeling hopeless. We no longer rejoice in rain, which is known to be a blessing from God. We do not want this. We are actually praying that it won't rain because things will get worse for us. The condition of another resident, Tshidi Lamela, is slightly worse. A neighbor had to leave the flooded house and move in with his relatives. Again, a neighbor had to leave his house, which was flooded inside and out. But what can I do? I can't sleep when it rains because one day the water will get into the house like they did to my neighbors and I might get swept because I'm old. Unlike his neighbors, he can neither afford to relocate nor has a large family. Culture loss, the three residents' biggest concern right now is, as they will have to rent places they can't afford or ask the unaffected to open their homes for memorial services and funerals, which is taboo in most black communities. Lamela's neighbor could not be buried in-house, as the dirty water filled entire house. Other events were also affected. We had to cancel parties, opening ceremonies and everything else because people cannot come to a place like this, Katu said. Words. None of three residents knew about source of water, beyond promises from officials who visited area in 2022 that they would be relocated to temporary shelters. They come here in fancy cars. Even Ntombizodwa came and promised us something until he was removed from office. We have never heard from the new Prime Minister. Urgent court offer. The Daily Maverick spoke with the Keswa, Provincial Director of the South African Human Rights Commission, about the plight of Nyakallong residents. Keswa said Commission was aware of the problem, but situation was not getting worse. This seems kind of urgent. We may need to go to the High Court urgently as we look at other options. In cases where he feels that his recommendations are not being followed, he can execute court decisions and reports. Keswa added that they are also aware of other problems in the province. The Commission was planning a provincial investigation in the first quarter of the year in which municipalities would be called to testify on issues within their jurisdiction. The Commission has produced research reports over the years on long-standing problems, including the water crisis, but nothing has changed. Subway, Mangaung, is a mess. The national government has intervened, but we are not seeing any improvement, he said. State intervention. Lejweleputswa District Mayor Veronica Ntombizodwa confirmed that the water in residents' homes was contaminated and a plan was in place to move them to a different area. But they were stubborn. Ntombizodwa said he has been to the area twice since taking office in 2021. We contacted the people there. When you think about moving people from one region to another, you know very well that the hard thing is our people's stubbornness of saying, I grew up here. The first stage of that was to move them because that area in water, houses are already submerged in water, the water there not ordinary, it acidic water, sinking. We wanted to have an alternative place for people, but people themselves aren't interested in moving. That's the crisis we're sitting in, she said. But all residents Daily Maverick spoke to had no knowledge of information from Mayor. Crime and water cuts. There is crime and water shortages, among other problems residents are struggling with. According to Katu, crime is rampant mostly at night, and the absence of functional streetlights exacerbates the situation. We don't go around at night because it's too dark and young kids chase and rob us. But even our gardens, they come in and buy whatever they find and sell at the junkyard. We are not safe at all, Katu said. Residents also expressed concern over the water shortages that have occurred for more than 4 years, ranging from 10 to 15 hours at a time. Leseke said, the water can be cut off from 1 in the evening until 1 the next day. This is a normal thing for us now. We're used to it now, he said when asked how they survived. Municipal Infrastructure DA Councilor Tshidi lamented that our 45.4 million in unspent infrastructure grants were returned to the National Treasury. Still, the municipality's infrastructure has deteriorated so much that water losses have increased from 22% in 2019 to 56% each year. This means our 324 million worth of water is lost per year as communities go without water for weeks. There is no shortage of funds to maintain municipal infrastructure. Look forward to the release part 2 of this series where we take a deeper dive into the situation Lejweleputswa County Council.